I love Kyle Manangi and his video game numbers. Not as much as Greg Schiano loves him, but he is awfully fun to watch run. How about 19 carries for $165 in week 1, followed up by a career-high 208 and 3 touchdowns in week 2 for the Scarlet Knightback in a win over Akron. We are back on Big Ten Today. Rick Pizzo and Jake Butt discussing Jake's 2024 game changers, and we start on the banks with Kyle Manangi. I don't think we can any longer say he's underrated, he's undervalued. Now the nation knows about this guy, which perhaps makes it even more impressive to see what he's done through 2 weeks.
Well, here's what's going to happen, too. Rutgers is going to continue to win, and they're going to continue to look good, and sooner or later they're going to find themselves inside the top 25, and they're going to continue to win, and teams are going to say, what's different? They're going to go look up Rutgers highlight tapes, and they're going to see number 5 running through the heart of every single defense. And what makes a good running back a great running back? You're always going to meet a first defender at some point, make a miss. Kyle Manangi always makes the first guy miss. But then he's got this blend of agility and power. He can run around you, he can run through you. The biggest thing for him, and as it applies to Rutgers as a whole, is a leadership. Watch that guy block. He stones linebackers consistently, fearless on the football field.
It's incredible when you think about the numbers he put up last year with a pass game that was basically not there on a lot of different Saturdays. You're facing 8- and 9-man boxes. Now maybe if Ethan Kaliakmanis finds a little bit of a groove with Kirk Shiraka and that opens things up, we could be talking about a guy with record-setting numbers, a guy that returned this year as the man who led the Big Ten in rushing a year ago.
You said it. He's putting up video game numbers already. There's just no reason to doubt him, and he's extremely durable, too.
Let's discuss USC quarterback Miller Moss. I love your description of Moss. You believe he's a game changer, not because he has that kind of singular talent that Caleb Williams has, but because he is, in your words, quote, an extension of Lincoln Riley. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so people say system quarterback as if it's a negative. It's not a negative at all. Like Lincoln Riley's system has produced Heisman candidates, Heisman Award winners, Heisman finalists, top offense. That's the system. Well, last year, Caleb was so talented, almost to a fault. He did his own thing. He'd ad-lib out on the field. Whereas Miller Moss, I think if you could take Lincoln Riley and give him the talent that Miller Moss has, that's what you're seeing on the field right now. When Lincoln Riley calls a play, he calls it for a reason. Miller Moss trusts him, and then he puts the ball exactly where it needs to be. And he did it under pressure in the biggest moments, fourth quarter, game-winning drive, LSU.
You want to call those quarterbacks that played for Lincoln Riley system quarterbacks? Yeah, go ahead and call them system quarterbacks, as in good enough to go to an NFL system after they play with Lincoln Riley during their college careers. We haven't seen much of Jeremiah Smith yet. We'll get to see more of him. For how long we get to see him, probably as long as the NCAA requires him before he can go to the NFL draft. But this Ohio State youngster has all the skills to be the next great guy in this amazing lineage of Buckeye wideouts. They have a factory somewhere where they just copy and print and paste these elite receivers. It's actually not that easy. It takes more than a couple of keystrokes.
Yes, okay, but he looks like Marvin Harrison, right? And in some ways, I think he's better after the catch than Marvin Harrison, maybe more explosive. Marvin had great body control, but so does Jeremiah Smith. And, you know, what's so impressive, we were talking to the Ohio State staff last week. They didn't just say, yes, he'd be an NFL player. They told us that they think he's a starter on every single NFL team right now. He's 18 years old right now.
That is an unbelievable quote. And you think back to this lineage, Olave said, no, I'm not good. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be better than me. And JSN said, I may be good, but Marvin Harrison's going to be better than me. Harrison knew that about Jeremiah Smith. And don't forget, Carnell Tate's on this team as well. I mean, you are so loaded. Emeka Ibuka, the veteran wide receiver, as well. That's why this has been described as the natty or bust 2024 for Ohio State. I love that you threw Xavier Scott in here because he's not a guy that would jump in the forefront of your mind when you talk about game changers, but that's exactly what he's doing for this Illinois defense.
Yeah, well, just go turn on the highlights of that game last week versus Kansas and tell me you don't see a game changer. Tell me you don't see a guy that stuffed the stat sheet. 8 solo tackles, a TFL, a sack, forced fumble, 2 interceptions, and a touchdown. And, I think about this Illinois defense at their best a few years ago with Sidney Brown, Witherspoon, and the law firm. They had guys that were elite. The best player on on the field. Xavier Scott was the best player on the field last weekend when Illinois' defense was out there. That, to me, is a game changer. And as we talked about earlier, Illinois is a team playing with a ton of confidence. And if they continue to win, which they very well could continue to win, I think Xavier Scott's going to be one of those emotional leaders defensively, which, me, fits the definition of game changer.
And did that against a Kansas offense that's unique with Jalen Daniels, has given a lot of really good defenses issues over the last couple of years. Scott and the Illini basically just completely shut him down. Let's go now to another youngster in Dylan Raiola. There was so much made of his decision to attend Nebraska, all the family ties he has there. Matt Rhule has said from the start, I'm not treating him with kid gloves. He's going to have to go out and win games when we need him to win games. He hasn't had to go crazy yet in this season because Nebraska's defense has been really good, but he has certainly more than looked the part.
Yeah, and just the maturity he shows. Like, I get it. Colorado, they're definitely not a playoff team. I know some people thought that. But that's a rivalry game. There was a lot of emotion. There was some trash talk back and forth. That's a sold-out crowd. That's a primetime game. And he didn't miss a beat. He didn't put his team in harm's way. He looked extremely comfortable. And what they did is they didn't ask too much of him. But he didn't feel the need through his own ego to prove himself. He just ran the offense, ran the system, and that's more than what you can ask for as a freshman. Matt Rhule is not one, like you said, he's not handing out compliments, and I think Joel Klatt alluded to this. But he said this week, yeah, actually, it's the other 10 guys offensively that need to match Raiola's production, which I think just tells you what a good coach, Matt Rhule, thinks about his young quarterback.
Yeah, I would say that Dylan Raiola looked a little bit like a guy who understands what Memorial Stadium can be like with a top-tier opponent and hype coming in, understands what it's like to be under the microscope, which makes a lot of sense when you consider how he grew up and what the ties are to Nebraska. Finally, you mentioned Jonah Coleman a little bit early in the show when talking about Washington and what they've done in the first two games of the Jedd Fisch era. He's a name unfamiliar to most Big Ten fans. I think you need to get familiar with this guy very often and very quickly because he is going to be the focus of this Washington offense.
You're right. He's flying under the radar. Like, we talk about Kyle Manangi, we talk about Caleb Johnson, the running backs at Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, all this. This guy is really special, and I had the pleasure to call his Week 1 game against Weber State, and I get it. This will be a tougher opponent against Washington State this weekend, but there's still things that translate regardless of the opponent on tape. This guy has breakaway speed and juice. He's 5'8", 230, so he's got the power to run through you, but he's got elite vision. There was a number of times where he's running an outside zone to the right. I couldn't even see it with a bird's eye view, but he sees it across the field cut, puts his foot in the ground and goes all the way. And like that, those are elite characteristics that translate. He had an extremely productive and explosive season at Arizona last year, and Jedd Fisch is very comfortable running the offense through him. So you expect his production to continue to be at a high level.
Yeah, more than 8.5 yards per carry so far, and even as competition gets a little bit tougher, they're going to go to him. You can find talent and throws in Will Rogers when you need him, but it will be the run to set up the pass. Very unlikely it'll be the other way around up in Seattle.